manufacturer of the jamming machine. You can't make this up. How many people who are using their drones to drop drugs and weapons into penitentiaries register the drone? How many? 0. And yet we expect our officers to work there without a door when it comes to the Bernardos and Magnotas of the world. But take solace, the pillows aren't softer. I'll go back to the letter now. When I first got word of Bernardo's move, I contacted several politicians of all different parties. Well, that was a pretty wise move. I was put in touch with an organization called My Voice, My Choice, which I'm sure that many people around this table have been in touch with. These are brave women who have spoken about their traumatic experiences as victims, and not only as victims, but what I would call, or other people have called, and I would adopt as secondary or systemic victimization. Systemic victimization, like the victims of Bernardo and Magnota are probably going through, dare I speculate, in these circumstances where the system reopens that scar, that victimization, or even the scar that's not completely closed. It just gets open again and again. So shout out to people from My Voice, My Choice. They contacted people to get things changed when it came to publication bans, and they contacted all parties. So I remembered that as reading this letter. I contacted several politicians of all parties. It wasn't my concern which party was better or worse, rather which party would listen and help get this horrible decision reversed. Well, we could have had 6 meetings to do this. In fact, the Liberals came in and said, we will have 6 meetings. Not only will we have 6 meetings, we want more witnesses, and we will add it. It was fairly nonpartisan, I thought. The Conservatives said we want it. We want the meeting. The Bloc signed on for an emergency meeting, and the NDP said we want the 6 meetings. And then the Bloc inexplicably says, no, we only want 1 meeting. And the Liberals gladly withdrew their witnesses and went to 1 meeting. Doesn't matter which party they say. They want this horrible decision reversed. Well, we couldn't actually even hear from the victims on that point because the victims were the witnesses who were excised from the witness list that the Liberals were all too happy to agree to initially with 6 meetings, and now, no, we only want 1 meeting. How is that victim-centered? How is that not contributing to secondary victimization? Mr. Chair, it is no doubt, in my view, that that is contributing to secondary victimization. More concretely, it's a complete slap in the face. A complete slap in the face to the victims who were watching and as a result wrote this very punchy letter, saying it 1,000 times better than I ever could have. The letter goes on. It was very clear today that the safety and well-being of the public is not a concern to certain people and their designated parties. We, as parliamentarians, should be concerned. I believe I know who this letter is referring to. I'll let the public judge for themselves. We've had a few personal attacks today. I'm not going to go there. People can watch the video themselves and see who they believe acted appropriately and see who didn't. They know who they are, and in their heart, I would hope they know whether they acted appropriately, especially with the dismissive language that was used, in my view. That personal agenda supersedes any of the victims, their rights, and the crimes committed against them. In other words, these are 3 women, victims as defined in the criminal code, in my view, said that the personal agenda of certain members around this table got in the way of us talking about what was important, of us talking about what matters. I'm going to say that again. And I would be remiss to Mr. Chair if I might interrupt. I know this isn't relevant, but I believe we have some young people from 4-H who've joined us as well. Is that correct? I know that a few of them are from my riding of Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou, so welcome. Mr. Couric is coming to say hello. I don't think he's ever had contact with an animal in his life, so you can educate him. Just look at his boots and you'll know.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo, and on behalf of the committee, I welcome our students, and once again, welcome to the thrust and parry of Parliament.
So, returning back, that personal agenda supersedes the victims, their rights, and the crimes against them. These are victims saying, people around this table put themselves and their political agendas above us. You know who you are. They put themselves and their political agendas above. And then not only that, afterwards, this committee refuses to study the Magnotta transfer that we all agreed to with the one meeting, which, as I noted, was the gutting of the 6 meetings that the Liberals initially agreed to. We haven't even gotten to that meeting. So the victims are saying politics is superseding victims. And what are we doing? Not even studying the very thing we agreed to study for the one meeting. At this rate, we won't study it till the fall. In fact, I think the Liberals and Bloc would be content if we never studied this at all. More concretely, we're not even presenting the draft report on the Bernardo study. What could possibly be more of putting a political agenda before victims than that? There's a report ready to go, is it not? At least to be discussed. We should be dealing with this, and yet the members of this committee will go on today with their daily lives, not having to live with the trauma that the victims of the Bernardo and Magnotta offences have to deal with. Many of them living who, again, nameless, faceless, voiceless. And this is the respect we show them. This is the respect we show them, that we don't even get to this report. Mr. Danson's quotes about the pillow from the chair, as he then was as a committee member, they were made December 4th last year. It is now May 23rd. 6 months have elapsed since that quote was made. And we don't even have a report to discuss to show for it, let alone a report that has been made public. And that lies at the feet of the Liberals, with the Liberals' hand being held by the Bloc. And today, the hand was held by the NDP when it came to not hearing from witnesses of auto theft. Just to be clear, and just for reference, Mr. Chair, I'm returning to the letter. Just to be clear, those who voted against us today, I presume it's those who voted for the one meeting, that being the Liberals, at least 2 of whom are here today, present, and the Bloc, the member who is here present today. The NDP member was Mr. Julian. He did not vote. He voted for the 6 meetings, in fairness to him. Just to be clear, those who voted against us today, you are telling the victims and their families that what has happened to them wasn't that bad. Enough time has passed now, and the monster who committed these crimes against them has done the time and deserves to be rewarded, very key word there, rewarded and live better than most Canadians today. So let's dissect that. Sorry, I'm going to go on to the next line here. I want you to reread that again in bold. Paul Bernardo is living better than most Canadians today. I said that same thing, and I really heard about it. This is coming from the victims. So let's dissect this. You are telling the victims and their families that what has happened to them wasn't that bad. This is that secondary trauma, that secondary victimization I'm talking about. That this committee will not do what...
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, listen, we have microphones that work really well. We are hearing Mr. Caputo really, really well. Does he really have to shout? Maybe he can lower the volume a little bit. That could be good for everyone. And also, is he really obliged to repeat the same things? We're starting to understand his point. And again, a question for him. What's the position of the Conservative Party on S-210? Is that the reason why he is filibustering today? Does he not want to hear about that bill? Maybe he has other things to say on that.
Thank you, Madame Michaud. I would certainly urge Mr. Caputo to keep his volume down, and certainly on behalf of the members and certainly on behalf of the interpreters. I would also certainly advise that, we could get back on topic better, but go ahead.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I think we're directly on topic when it comes to this. And it's interesting that my colleague from the Bloc said we're starting to get the point. That's what came through the translation. If we're just starting to get to the point, maybe I should repeat it a little bit more often. Because if this is what it takes to get to the victims, if we're just starting to hear
Mr. Caputo,
dealing with,
could you turn your mic around?
well, I was
The
told I was too
interpreters
loud.
can't hear you when you put the mic on the other side of the table.
Okay. Well, I was told I was
So
too
don't
loud.
don't shout into the mic. Speak normally, and the interpreters can do their work.
Again, with
On the
respect-
same point, Chair.
Mr. Jennings, on a point of order.
Thank you. I think that speaking with intensity and passion is actually what is normal for Mr. Caputo. So if the goal is for him to do the normal thing, maybe it's helpful if the chair specify.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jennings. So let the record show that Mr. Caputo, if you try to keep your volume within, I don't know, I don't want to use the word normal, but kind of keep it down so that the interpreter's ears are protected, please.
I'm not sure if I'm sure we have the interpreters in the back there. I have a voice that carries, I'm told. I will keep the microphone.
Also, Mr. Caputo, please don't touch the mic.
Well, with all due respect, Chair, we can't have it both ways. You can't say don't speak the way
I'm
you're
not saying
speaking.
don't speak. I'm saying don't touch the microphone.
Well,
It causes feedback. It causes problems, right? Speak in a plausibly loud voice, but that they can hear, but not too loud that it hurts anybody. But don't touch the mic, please.
okay. Well, I apologize to the interpreters if I've hurt their ears.
And please don't be insulting to the
I am
interpreters.
not.
Just trying to do their job.
I am not being
So
condescending.
condescending.
I am not. Ms. O'Connell, I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking. I would appreciate the same courtesy. Thank you.
Don't be condescending to people who are just trying to do their jobs in a safe manner.
Ms. O'Connell, I didn't interrupt you. I would appreciate the same courtesy.
Let's avoid the back and forth, please.
Mr. Chair, I do apologize if I've hurt anybody's ears, and I will try to modulate my voice accordingly and still speak with the passion that I believe that. Mr. Biddle, I didn't interrupt you here. You've just arrived. I would appreciate the same courtesy from you as well. Thank you.
Mr. Caputo, please,
No.
please avoid the back and forth. If you have an issue with Mr. Biddle, raise it with the chair, please.
Well, with all due respect, Chair, I was speaking. I had the floor, and I am raising it with you because all comments go through you. So through you, I did not interrupt Mr. Biddle. I don't intend to interrupt Mr. Biddle. So through you, Mr. Chair, I would ask him to not interrupt me and afford me the same courtesy that I intend to afford to him.
Mr. Biddle and Mr.
Well, shall we get to your votes, Mr. Biddle, on
Biddle
this
and
very
Mr.
issue?
Caputo, please stop.
Go ahead.
Gentlemen? Gentlemen?
He just doesn't have the floor.
Could we please avoid the back and forth?
It's amazing.
Mr. Jennis?
So does yours.
Mr. Jennis, Ms. O'Connell, let us maintain some order here. Mr. Caputo, I believe you have the floor.
Thank you,
Mr. Jennis. No side comments, please. Mr. Caputo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll get back to this letter that I was speaking about. Let's repeat that last paragraph again because I think it's quite germane to what we just observed here. Just to be clear, those who voted against us today, you are telling the victims and their families that what has happened to them wasn't that bad. Enough time has passed now, and that the monster who committed these crimes against them has done the time and deserves to be rewarded and live better than most Canadians today. I want you to reread that again. Paul Bernardo is living better than most Canadians today. And so as we brought this up, sorry, I'm trying to keep my voice down. Since we brought this up, let's talk about Mr. Generou's private member's bill that would have sent Paul Bernardo back to maximum security. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how members around this table voted. I vote in favor of it. Mr. Shipley voted in favor of it. Mr. Viersen voted in favor of it. Where did the Liberals vote? They voted against. Every one of them voted against. The NDP voted against it. The Bloc voted against it. This is exactly what, in my view, is being contemplated by this letter. Moving on to the letter. We pray that nothing like this ever happens to you or your families. I think that's actually a very charitable thing to say in the circumstances. We pray that nothing like this ever happens to your families. But we can say with certainty, if the tables were turned, today would have had a whole different outcome. Now, this is the whole point that was being made in the letter. We as victims are experiencing something differently. Victims have met with members, sorry, my voice was getting loud again. Victims have met with members of this committee. The victims in the Bernardo matter, I know because I got CC'd on the emails that were sent to members of this committee who seem more intent on making a joke out of things than treating this issue with the dignity and seriousness it deserves. We weren't there. We weren't them. And what are we doing? We're saying we're not getting to the study of Magnotta that we all agreed to. From 6 meetings to 1, just that one meeting, we don't want to get to it. What are we all saying? We don't want to table the Bernardo report, even though it looks like meetings wrapped up in December, January, maybe February. Clerk, you can advise us of the dates, I'm sure. But I do pause to say this. What if it was our sisters? What if it was our brothers? I have 2 sisters. I have a daughter. I have lots of friends, I think.
On division.
That was pretty good. If this was us, would we be prepared to make the same claim? Would we be prepared to vote the same way on Bernard Genereux's private members bill that would have sent Paul Bernardo back to maximum security? Would we have been prepared to do that? I believe we wouldn't. I don't believe for a second that we would have. And that is the problem with the approach taken by the Liberals and the Bloc when it came to the reduction of 6 meetings to 1. When it came to the subcommittee report that we have before us that doesn't have either the Magnotta meeting on the list or that doesn't have completion of the Bernardo study on the list. If this was our brother, this was our sister that was a victim, our friends, our family, anybody we knew, it's my view that our approach would be radically different. Our best friend's voice may have been stolen from her. I'm going back to the letter. Our best friend's voice may have been stolen from her, but let us be very clear. She is as loud as ever and will forever be heard. Yes, your best friend's voice will be forever heard. She will live on, and I hope that we will not forget. We will never stop fighting for her and for the justice of her and all victims alike. Marcia Penner, Tani Hilton, Laura Murray. So yeah, there are things that are more important than asking whether the pillows are softer in medium security. There are things that are more important than what we do here today in the eyes of some. But in my eyes, it's more important to address the fact that this committee undertook a study of the transfer of Paul Bernardo and doesn't want to report on it, that this committee undertook the position that it would study the Luca Magnotta transfer, despite it changing from 6 meetings to 1, and that still hasn't been scheduled. This letter, in my view, says it all. And with that, I'll give my time to someone else here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. Next on the list is Mr. Jennis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be relatively brief here, but I do want to add a couple quick comments. There has been desire for other members to offer commentary and to do so through points of order. I don't understand why they don't just speak to the issue in the usual fashion. I did just want to add that so what we're doing here is we are pushing for the committee to complete its report on the Paul Bernardo prison transfer. My colleague, Mr. Caputo, has done a great deal of excellent work on the issue of prison transfers, which includes going to prisons and understanding the situation that is on the ground in those places. And he's talked about the importance of getting it right when it comes to protecting the rights of victims and ensuring that heinous criminals remain in the appropriate level of security prison. And in the context of this committee, we are saying that whatever one's view on that issue, it is appropriate, the committee having done this study, the committee should provide a report to the House. There is a report, there is a draft report, and it should simply be completed and presented to the House. Liberals are trying to block this report. And so that's the context. Conservatives are fighting for the release of the report on the Bernardo prison transfer. We have proposed an amendment to the subcommittee on agenda and procedures report that calls for the release of that report. And we're certainly prepared to discuss and engage and negotiate on all other matters, but we are insisting on the release of the Bernardo report, that work is completed. And I hope members will see the value of that substantively and will work with us to realize that objective. I did want to add to the conversation just by saying that this is another case where we have Trudeau Liberals trying to avoid responsibility for what are in fact government decisions. Persistently across a range of different areas, Liberals want you to believe that they are not responsible for the things that happen under their watch. Justin Trudeau has been the Prime Minister of this country for 9 years and yet denies responsibility for any of the things that happen under his tenure. In this particular case, the question of prisoners transferred, it is up to Parliament to establish rules and to consider amendments to the law that deal with the level of security that a person experiences in prison. The decision not to pass a law is a policy choice, just as the decision to pass a law in that regard is a policy choice. And all of the other systems and people who work within the public service, they operate within a framework of law established by Parliament. We have a system of rule of law and of parliamentary supremacy. So public servants don't make arbitrary decisions without reference to law and policy. They act within laws that are established. And so, as you would expect, Conservatives proposed a change to the law in Parliament as it relates to these issues of security. That law was proposed by a Conservative MP, Mr. Bernard Genereux. The bill is C-351. So those members of the public who are interested in this issue of the prison transfer can and should consult the appropriate sites for details on what happened with this bill, what was said in the various debates, how it unfolded, and what the final vote on that bill was. So sadly, it did not pass, and it didn't pass because the other parties voted against it, all of them, as Mr. Caputo mentioned. And I'll just very simply read the summary, so there's no doubt about what this bill does. This enactment amends the Correction and Conditional Release Act to require that inmates who have been found to be dangerous offenders or convicted of more than one first-degree murder be assigned a security classification of maximum and confined in a maximum security penitentiary or area in a penitentiary. If this bill had become law, Paul Bernardo would have been sent back to maximum security prison. So Parliament did have a chance to vote precisely on this matter. The bill didn't name any individual, but it invited the House to make a determination on a matter of law related specifically to the circumstances that were at play in the Bernardo transfer case. And that bill is no more. If it had passed, it would have gone to a committee, perhaps this committee or perhaps the Justice Committee, I'm not sure. But had it passed, it would have been referred to a committee, and at least for study. I would submit to members that at second reading, the vote is not on the specific text, but it's on the principle of the bill. So the principle that was being considered at Bill C-351 was the principle of the bill, but there would have been plenty of time for study and amendment. And I know there are cases where members do vote at second reading for a bill that they think merits further study, even if they have concerns about aspects of the text, and even if they might well plan to vote a different way at third reading. Second reading is a chance to consider the principle before the House. And members of other parties, members of the other parties voted against it. During debate on Bill C-351, the parliamentary secretary to the government, to the leader of the government in the House of Commons, Mr. Kevin Lamoureux, spoke on the bill. That will surprise some members, but Mr. Lamoureux did speak on Bill C-351. And he said, quote, "It is one of the planks the Conservative Party members talk about. If we remember, there are 4 things they talk about, saying these are the things they would do if they were," he says, heaven forbid, "to form government. One of them is to abolish crime." He continues, "I'm not too sure exactly how they are going to abolish crime. I think they have some sort of wand, or through legislation, they are going to make it illegal to commit a crime. And therefore, if it is illegal to commit a crime, crime will go away. I suspect that is what they are thinking." End of quote. Those are the profound reflections of the member for Winnipeg North in the House of Commons. He is right to a point that the Conservative priorities we have been articulating in Parliament are to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. So stop the crime is one of those 4. And Mr. Lamoureux is wondering, how is it exactly that Conservatives will go about stopping the crime? The modest proposal I would maybe start with is that we will repeal the Liberal policies that have demonstrably led to an increase in crime. Violent crime was dropping in this country prior to the change in government. Liberals made specific policy changes based on their ideology, and those policy changes had consequences. The trajectory of crime in this country was reversed. And we've talked about some of these statistics. The astronomical growth in crime under this government, in particular certain areas of crime such as auto theft. I was sharing statistics earlier on the numbers around auto theft. I didn't get to mention the numbers for Winnipeg, but since I'm referencing Mr. Lamoureux's comments, I should say that the rate of auto theft in Winnipeg has gone up by 62.5% during the time that Liberals were in government. So what are we to make of that, Chair? The 62.5% increase in auto theft in Winnipeg is not of the same magnitude of increases in other areas. The well over 200% increase in the Greater Toronto area, the over 100% increase in Montreal, but crime has gone up dramatically under Liberals. So the Liberal Parliamentary Secretary is asking, and as part of the debate on C-351, what would Conservatives do to stop the crime? Well, we would start by stopping the Liberal policies that have led to an increase in crime. There may well be more to do after that, but that would seem like a logical place to start. But in the course of debate on Bill C-351, again, we had a bill before Parliament that would have precisely addressed this problem. Liberals want to know, how could it happen that a person would be transferred from maximum security to medium security? Well, how could it happen that they voted against the bill that would solve the problem? It's a very simple matter that could have been addressed with the vote at second reading on the bill. And any members with specific concerns about specific mechanics could well have brought those concerns to the committee study and maybe proposed reasonable amendments to the bill. The bill C-351 was sadly defeated when given the chance. Other parties voted against fixing this problem. They voted, in effect, in favor of continuing to allow prison transfers for people for Bernardo, people like him, for maximum and medium security. And I will just say in particular that this bill would not just prevent things like this from happening again, because this bill requires that inmates who fit a particular description be assigned a maximum security classification. The effect of this is that Mr. Bernardo would have been sent back to maximum security prison as soon as this legislation passed. In any event, this bill was defeated, and our position is that that the report that has now been sitting on the shelf for 6 months at this committee related to the prison transfer, that it be published. Because of the rules of in-camera, members and staff are not able to share that report with the public. The committee should finish its work on that report. We know drafting instructions were given, and as such, we can presume that there is a report that is ready, but it has not been tabled in the House. And so, to honor the victims and hopefully to hear some concrete recommendations, I suggest we proceed with that report. That is our position. That is what we're establishing through this process. And I hope that we'll see support for my amendment that would ensure that work gets done. I do hope the report contains a recommendation that measures like Bill C-351 are reconsidered. Of course, procedurally, that I don't think can happen in this Parliament. But you can be sure in the next Parliament that members will be fully engaged with these issues of protecting the rights of victims. And a Conservative government led by Pierre Poilievre will put the rights of victims first. We will ensure that victims who have suffered at the hands of violent criminals are not shocked and re-victimized to find out in the middle of the night that the person who has brutalized their family was transferred to medium security prison, and they weren't even engaged in the process in any way. You can be sure that that we will use the legislative authority that the House has, not constantly pass off responsibility as this government has always done. Chair, I've spoken mainly on Bill C-351 and the prison transfer. There are a number of other issues dealt with in this amendment. One of them is auto theft, and maybe that's what he's going to focus on. Maybe something else, I don't know. But I'm eager to hear from my colleague, Mr. Viersen, who has forgotten more than I will ever know about cars in general, and so I will cede the floor. But I'd like to be added back to the list, back at the bottom of the list.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. We go now to Mr. Viersen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I came here this morning interested to hear from the ministers around what the Liberal government is going to do, or is planning to do, or is doing to reduce auto theft in this country. Auto theft has been a major problem in Canada, and we have seen, as long as the Liberal government has been in power, we've seen a dramatic uptick. If you were to graph auto thefts in this country, you would see that auto theft was going down, trending down to 2015, and at that point there's a shift from trending down to trending upward with dramatic increases in the last number of years. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with the acting chief for my hometown of Barrhead, RCMP officer, and to just have a discussion around auto theft and how this is, what are the trends and what are some examples of problems that we have in our neighborhood around auto theft. And it was very interesting to have a meeting with him. He brought a particular case along with him. He said that this individual had likely stolen 15 cars in the last 10 years and had been charged 148 times, had been convicted 43 times, and had the remainder of those charges basically dropped or pled out. He complained about the fact that this was a revolving door, and he also noted that the bail system was completely broken and was causing a dramatic amount of. This was one individual who had like 100. They charged him 148 times. He's lives in our community, and a disproportionate amount of police resources goes into policing one individual. And they said, and he told me that multiple vehicles had been stolen by this individual while he was out on bail. He had been arrested in possession of a stolen vehicle, been put in jail, been released on bail, and was awaiting his trial, only to steal multiple more vehicles. And what happened, he said, was there was a bundling. He said by the time the court date appeared, the court date came, they would bundle, he said the prosecution would bundle all of the charges together, and he would plead guilty to some for the other ones to just disappear. And so the possession of stolen property, which he was charged with multiple times, would get bundled together because he'd get arrested for the first time, he'd get arrested the next time, he'd get arrested the next time, but he hadn't had the court date for the first arrest. And so by the time he made it to court, they would take multiple charges, bundle them together, and enter into a plea deal around all of that. So this gentleman, the police officer was telling me about, this gentleman has spent 4 out of the 10 years, the last 10 years in prison, all related to auto theft. But interestingly, was never once charged with auto theft. He was charged with possession of stolen property. So that's an interesting feature. The police. I said to the police officer, "Oh, that seems interesting. Why aren't you charging with auto theft?" And he says, "Well, the trouble with the courts right now is that you have to prove that the individual stole the vehicle, and many times you can't prove.
Point of order, Chair.
You cannot prove."
Mr. Jennings on a point of order.
Thank you, Chair. Respectfully, you have been a little bit selective about calling out members of one side and not the other side for crosstalk, and I would ask you to aspire to fair treatment of all members. Mr. I guess he's got Salma Zahid as the name card, but I don't think that's who it is. Mr. Biddle is Mr. Biddle is a man of many disguises. He's here repeatedly heckling my colleague from Peace River Westlock quite loudly, so much so that it would likely hurt people's ears if the mic was on. And I would ask that you bring him to order and allow
Thank you,
members to
Mr.
speak
Jennings.
without
Your point
interruption.
is taken. It was not sufficiently loud that I heard it. Perhaps I've gone into a coma. It may be the case. But I would advise, I would call upon all members to respect the speaker, who the person speaking at the time. Thank you. Mr. Biddle on the same point of order.
On a different point of order.
Different point
I'm
of
just,
order.
hoping to express that through the history of criminal law, the Crown has to prove that a crime actually is committed, which I was trying to suggest. And I was hoping that Mr. Vierson, who is a passionate champion
Point of order.
a passionate
It's not a
champion
matter of order.
of child protection with respect to pornography, if he could explain why he's filibustering us getting
Point
to
of
a
order,
bill that
Chair.
will
Point of
deal
order.
with the issue he has
is
been
not-
most passionate about
this
in
is
this
not a matter of
Parliament
order.
and previous Parliaments. Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Biddle, and I believe there's another point of order over here. Same point of order on Mr. Biddle's point of order?
On Mr. Biddle's point of order, Chair, I believe that that would have not been classified as a point of order, but rather descent into debate, which I hope that Mr. Biddle will be availing himself of the speaking list, Chair, which I know you are keeping close tabs on, and which, to conclude my point of order, I would just ask that you would outline what the speaking list is before I'm sure Mr. Viersen has a few more things to say.
Thank you. As said previously, it was after Mr. Jennis, it was Mr. Viersen, it was Mr. Shipley and Mr. Moss, but they are no longer here, so Mr. Kirk and then Mr. Jennis again. Mr. Viersen, please carry on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as I was saying, the police officer was telling me about the fact that it is the courts have made it increasingly difficult to prove that somebody has stolen the car. So he said, in all of these cases, the individual was found driving a stolen vehicle and was charged with being in possession of stolen property. There was no doubt in the police officer's mind that that this individual had in fact stolen the vehicle. However, the individual was never charged with stealing a vehicle because the way that the court system, I was informed by the police officer, the way the court system works is that the being in possession of the car that is stolen does not prove the fact that you stole the car. Nonetheless, very often there is video evidence of this, but that, again, the police officer said that was difficult to use in court. And so there's probably a number of things that the minister could do to make sure that this type of thing could happen. I have had many constituents reach out to me over stolen vehicles. I had the business owner who owns a business right across the street from my constituency office. He had a Nissan Armada. Now, a Nissan Armada is quite a rare vehicle in Canada, a very rare vehicle in northern Alberta, and he also had aftermarket wheels on that Nissan Armada, which made it an even more unique vehicle. There's likely very few in our county, in my hometown. I don't know of another Nissan Armada, and the fact that he put aftermarket wheels on it makes it very identifiable. That vehicle was stolen. Folks broke into his house, stole the keys off the kitchen counter, went in his garage, and stole both of his vehicles out of his garage. He subsequently found that Nissan Armada on Kijiji that looked like his and had the same wheels, the same aftermarket wheels that he had. And he approached the police to say, "Hey, I found my Nissan Armada on the internet here for sale. Could you go and retrieve it?" He was told that they did not have the resources to do that, and that he should just deal with his insurance company to get a new Nissan Armada. So these are the stories that we have to deal with. The other thing I would point out is just around the security systems. And so it's fascinating to think in Alberta, the number one vehicle stolen is a Ford pickup. And an interesting thing about that is that I think it's up till about 2006, the Ford pickups, the diesel pickups anyways, they did not have an immobilizer system on them from factory. So they get stolen a lot more because they don't have that immobilizer system on them, as well as the what is termed the second gen Cummins pickups. Also, many of them do not have what's called the SCIM program on them. SCIM key or Sentry Key Immobilizer is what I think the SCIM stands for. And so those vehicles are stolen more often. Now, in Northern Alberta, auto theft, it looks different than it does in Toronto or Montreal, given the fact that most often auto theft happens in our neighborhood in conducting other crime. Folks steal a vehicle to then go and steal steal fuel, steal copper, steal batteries, all these kinds of things. Often when these vehicles are retrieved, they're either burnt on a side road somewhere, or they're found run out of fuel. And many times, if they're found with the folks in them, they'll often arrest the person, and there will be batteries and copper and fuel in the box of the pickup as well. I also have experienced in our hometown a Ford 1-ton pickup was stolen, and they backed it through the front window of the jewelry store, and made off with several $1,000s worth of jewelry. And so the vehicles that are being stolen are being used in the commission of other crimes. All of this goes back to, though, the fact that the 2017, the Liberals changed the bail system, and that has led to a crime wave across Northern Alberta. And like I pointed out earlier, the one individual that the police officer showed me his file, most of those crimes had been committed while the individual is out on bail. I am being heckled from across the way about this being confidential. No, it's not confidential. These are all public records, because this individual has been through the court system several times. He has been convicted 43 times. He's had 143 charges against him. These are all publicly available documents. The newspaper has repeatedly reported on this individual and the crime waves that ensue when this individual is back out on the streets, back out on bail. And the frustration that the RCMP feel when they basically catch these guys red-handed in the possession of stolen vehicles, stolen batteries, stolen copper, stolen fuel, and they say it's just very difficult to prove a lot of this stuff. Fuel doesn't come with a great identifier. Gasoline looks like gasoline, regardless of where you got it from. And they are like, we know it is stolen, but it is difficult to prove. Now, I'm hearing from across the way that they say, well, there's a burden of proof and things like that. Yes, there is no doubt about that. But my question is are the Liberals standing here today to defend criminals, or are they here to be concerned about the victims? And I think that's fundamentally the difference between Conservatives and Liberals. Conservatives are concerned about the victims of crime. We work hard to ensure that crime is brought to justice. We are concerned that we want to mitigate the impacts of crime. We want to mitigate. We want to ensure that folks that work extremely hard to pay for food and fuel and housing themselves and their vehicles, that they can enjoy those things, that they work very hard to make the money in order to pay for them. I have a constituent who his fuel card was stolen out of one of his trucks while he was Well, he was away on holidays for 10 days, and by the time he came back, $25,000 worth of fuel was stolen from his card lock. That fuel is, they have a pretty good idea of who stole it, and yet the fuel is long gone, and there is no ability for the police to say to arrest the folks. Now, the Liberal from across the way is saying, well, you're going to have to prove that. Well, that is what I am saying is we can change the law to make sure that the ability for the police to prove these things, the threshold for these things, could be reduced. We could make changes around thresholds for video evidence to be submitted to the. In many cases, in most of these cases, there is clear video evidence of folks stealing this. It's so blatant. It's so blatant, and in many cases, we get a conviction of the individual that I was mentioning off the top was convicted 43 times. The challenge is that in between, same with the fellow that stole the $25,000 worth of fuel. He was eventually arrested and convicted on another series of crimes, and he went to jail. But he was back out on bail, committing more crime in the interim. He got arrested. He was released the next day. Committed in the intervening months, committed several more crimes, and then by the time he was put in jail, he had been charged and committed more crimes, and though again was bundled together, pled guilty, and we see this like ongoing. Now, the police get very frustrated with these individuals because they see they are not at all concerned about the ramifications of the justice system. The police work very hard. The police spend a lot of resources to arrest these guys, to build a case, and only to see the bulk of the work get bundled and the pled out when they've built cases for 143 charges or 148 charges, and he gets convicted of 43 charges, and the rest were dropped due to pleading out. That is fundamentally the problem. We need to make sure that these guys are being reformed. That we need to make sure that they're brought to justice. There needs to be punishment for the crime, and then there needs to be reformation so that they are not just being released back out on the street in order to continue their life of crime. And that has been the revolving door that our communities are extremely frustrated about, the police are extremely frustrated about, and that the Liberals are fundamentally responsible for. They are the government of the land. They are responsible for legislating. They are responsible for judge appointments. They are responsible for funding the court system. They're responsible for all of these things. So, regardless, we have seen the macro trends of crime across this country and auto theft across this country continue to go up since the Liberals
Mr. Kirk, on point of order.
You know, I've certainly been fascinated to hear what my colleague Mr. Viersen is saying and his the very practical experience to which he's sharing with this committee. But I would equally certainly like to hear the commentary that Mr. Biddle has been providing. Unfortunately, it's in the form of heckling, so it won't make it on the record because I'm sure him and his constituents and many Canadians would love to know his thoughts on this matter and so many others. So, Chair, I would ask that, as was referenced before, just the fair application of the conversations that are not supposed to go on across the table, and notably for what Mr. Biddle has been suggesting, because I have a suspicion that and I won't get into the place of debate here, but certainly his constituents, I'm sure, would love to hear the context to which he has been heckling across the table, and interestingly is doing so at the same time while I'm speaking to you, Mr. Chair. So that fair application of the rules, I would hope, is a guiding principle for all members of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Carrick. Your point is well taken. Before, I encourage all members to respect the committee and to avoid heckling and crosstalk. And Mr. Viersen, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, I would just perhaps suggest that you put Mr. Biddle on the speaking list as well, as he seems to have a lot to say in this committee today.
Point of order.
I might ask for unanimous consent for that, but it doesn't sound like that.
Mr. Biddle on a point
Yes,
of order.
unanimous consent that I speak for 60 seconds.
Add
right now
to the speaking list.
No, I can
Nonetheless, Mr. Speaker,
So on the
I'll
point of
continue.
order, Mr. Biddle is asking for 60 seconds by unanimous consent. Do we have unanimous consent? There is no unanimous consent.
On a different point of order?
Mr. Biddle on another point of order.
It's unfortunate that motion failed, since Mr. Carrick did want to hear from me. But again, I'm hoping that Mr. Viersen can turn his remarks back to S210, and again, as a champion for protecting children, why he's still
Not a
considering
point of
this
order,
legislation.
Chair. Can you enforce the rules? Mr. Biddle is showing.
Mr. Jennings,
As am I.
please do not interrupt. Mr. Biddle had the floor. I believe that point of order is done, and let's carry on with Mr. Viersen as we were.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we did gather here today to hear from two ministers on what the Liberal government is going to be doing around auto theft. I would point out that the Conservatives' part of our Stop the Crime initiative is around auto theft, and our not jail, not bail for repeat offenders. It will go a long ways to go to alleviating some of the crime problems that we have here in Canada, because many of the crimes, as I pointed out earlier, many of the crimes are committed by criminals who are out on bail. And the reality is in the one case that I was laying out earlier, is this gentleman stole 15 vehicles over the course of 10 years, and many of while he was in jail for 4 of those years, and many of those vehicles that were stolen while he was out on bail after being arrested for stealing the first vehicle in between. So I mentioned that. Now, the crimes, the vehicle thefts across the country have been going up dramatically in the last number of years, and particularly in the last 2 years. So, like year over year, 2023 over 2022, Ontario was up 50%. Quebec was up 50%. Alberta was up 20%. And Atlantic Canada was up 35%. And that's just year over year, 2023 over 2022. And that is significant. And this is, again, I would refer people to the graph. If you were to graph auto theft in this country, you would have seen declining auto theft up to 2015, and since 2015, you've seen an increase. And in the last couple of years, a dramatic increase, a 50% increase over year over year, causes that line to increase very, very steeply. We've seen the insurance industry has come out claiming that vehicle thefts are costing the Canadians over $1 billion every year. Now, I was in I've spoken to many people who have had their vehicles get stolen. I was in Toronto not that long ago, and I was talking to a fellow who had his Chevy Suburban stolen. It was a year and a half old, so he still had 5 years worth of payments to be made on it, and he was frustrated around the fact that he said, well, when he reported it to the police, they said, well, just contact your insurance. And he pointed out that the replacement of that Suburban, he was out of pocket about 30%. He said, yes, I got a 3 model year newer Suburban when I bought a new one, but that new Suburban cost about 30% more than the original Suburban I had. And so he said, I wasn't intending to buy a new Suburban, but now here I was, and it's out of pocket. So never mind when the insurance industry says that they've lost more than $1 billion in auto thefts. If the anecdotal story that I heard means that, so the insurance company is out that much money, and on top of that, individuals perhaps have to come up with another 30% in order to replace their vehicle. That means that another $300 million is out of pocket from Canadians in the drain on the economy that is having. All of that value presumably leaving our country. We heard about people's vehicles being within days being on containers leaving the Port of Montreal. I think I was here at this committee when we had the port authorities here. I think it was Halifax Port Authority, who said that they only inspect 0.3% of the containers. And then when we asked them, well, how many containers that are leaving the country do you inspect? And he said, well, virtually none. The inspections all happen to containers that are coming into the country, not containers that are leaving the country. And so that I was hoping to hear from the ministers today to see how that was, what they've put in place, how that's changing, what they're changing around the ports. We do know that they made some significant announcements around this, but announcements don't actually mean that stuff is actually happening. And so I was looking forward to hearing from the ministers about that today, but nonetheless, the Liberals blocked the testimony of the ministers today. And so here we are, not getting the answers we would like to hear from the ministers at this point. And so, yeah, the vehicle theft continues, the costs to Canadians continue, and we look forward to hearing from the ministers at a future date.
Point of order, Chair.
On a point of order? Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. It's just to help me better understand Mr. Vierson's remarks here. Like he did mention the Port of Montreal. Can the chair confirm, did any Conservative MPs show up at the Port of Montreal when there was a site visit there?
I'm not able to speak to that. Please go ahead, Madame Michaud. Allez-y.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le
Point of
Président.
order,
Je peux
Chair.
témoigner de
Point
ça.
of order, Chair.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le
Point of
Président.
order.
Je peux voir.
Excuse me, Ms. Michaud has the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
It's point of order. She doesn't have Mr. Vierson has the floor.
Mr. Genis, Madame Michaud has the floor.
No, she doesn't. Mr. Vierson has the floor.
I have recognized Madame Michaud. Please respond, Madame Michaud.
Chair, point of order. Mr. Vierson has the floor. We have a speaking list. It has Mr. Vierson, then Mr. Kirk speaking next.
I'm quite aware of the speaking list.
Great.
Ms. Michaud is responding to Mr. McGregor's point of order to give the information he's requesting. And it is the court's, sorry.
Which
the court,
stand-
it
under
is
which standing order was the
chair's
point of order
discretion.
raised?
Mr. Genis, please.
No, it's not the chair's discretion, Chair.
Mr. Genis.
You can't just make up the rules, Chair.
Mr. Genis,
Mr. Chair.
please come to order. Madame
too.
Michaud, please go ahead and respond
too.
to Mr.
Who has the floor
McGregor's
today?
Merci, Monsieur le
inquiry.
Président. Si Monsieur Janice veut bien.
Thank you, Chair. If Mr. Janice will let me speak, I can talk to the visit to the Port of Montreal. In fact, there was no Conservative MP who was present during the visit to the port.
Thank you, Madame Michaud. Mr. Janice on the point of order.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Chair, my understanding of the standing orders and the rules of this committee, which chairs don't sort of invent willy-nilly, there are rules that guide our work, is that a point of order is about a matter of order, not a request for substantive information. For instance, if I were to raise a point of order to ask Mr. Couric what his opinion was of some extraneous matter, I would assume you would rule that out of order. So I want to just encourage you to apply the rules and understand that your authority emanates from your
Mr. Janice?
rules, not from your person, independent of the rules.
Mr. Janice, it is not a point of order to instruct the chair. The chair will act according
order
to his best discretion
than the previous ones.
and to maintain order in the room. So if we're done with that, we'll carry on with Mr. Viersen again.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do know that I could talk a little bit more about immobilizer systems and things of that nature. However, I will turn the floor over to my colleague, Mr. Couric, and I would request to be put back on the speaking list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Viersen. So we go now to Mr. Couric, followed by Mr. Janice, followed by Mr. Viersen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I do find it interesting, before I get into the substance of my remarks, that although there is much commentary by other members of this committee, they don't seem to be willing to put themselves on the record in that regard and be put on the speaking list. So, as has been
Mr. Couric, excuse me.
the...
I would encourage all members to respect whomever is speaking and not interject. Please go ahead, Mr. Couric.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I hope that the fellow member of your caucus heeds your words in that regard. I would just note that I was very pleased to have a chance to visit briefly with the 4-H members that joined the committee and watched some of the proceedings here earlier today, and just to compliment them and to make sure that that is in fact on the record, Chair, and especially how valuable of an organization 4-H is across Canada, and how they are building the leaders of today that I have no doubt will take their seats around tables like this and in the House of Commons in the future. And just to note, as I mentioned to the 4-H students before, those impromptu and prepared speeches, that 4-H is exceptionally good, and those who have been through 4-H understand the 4-H public speaking. They're great preparation for things like member statements, question periods, and committee interventions. So kudos to everybody who is in Ottawa this week for 4-H. And some of the advocacy they're doing on behalf of that organization, and some of the real frustration about the cuts, actually, that the Liberals have made to that organization. I would, however, like to jump into the substance of what has been being discussed here. And it's interesting because there are the two very important items. One, of course, as Mr. Viersen had been talking about, we have the auto theft issue. And I will just take a brief moment, if I could, to talk about a story that a constituent shared with me. And
Actually, Mr. Couric, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just thought it might be helpful to bring us to remind the committee on the motion that's before us. The motion before us is Mr. Janice's amendment to the subcommittee report, as long as everyone in the room is kind of aware of that.
Absolutely.
I'll give the floor back to you, Mr. Couric.
And very, very glad that that you're ensuring that there is relevance to the subject at hand, because absolutely, and as it is clearly laid out in the motion that is before the committee, a very clear connection to the impacts that Canadians are feeling about things like auto theft. And I would note one of the stories that was shared with me, and because it has particular relevance, because quite often I think, and politicians gain this reputation of being disconnected from the people. disconnected from the people. It's a troubling trend that leads to, I think, mistrust in not only politicians but our institutions. And that's why I'd like to share something that has pertinent and clear relevance to the subject at hand, and that is the fact, Chair, that I heard from a constituent the other day.
I'm sorry, did I hear a
About
point of
the
order?
instance
Through a
of.
point of order, which I think Mr. Genuis won't.
So, Minister Biddle, on a point of order, go ahead.
Mr. Kirk is leaning into his mic and just popped one of his peas. This is, as you can, Mr. Kirk, like me,